What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. I've gotten requests to do some metagame breakdowns or top decks, top picks for the Players' Cup 2 Phase 2, which is coming up this weekend. I believe deck lists have to be in by Friday. I will not be playing because I did very poorly in the qualifying stage of Players' Cup 2. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about this. I'm not playing in this, but I do have a fair amount of preparation for this standard format, helping clients prepare for this, working on lists, just kind of my normal keep up with the standard format as being a competitive content creator and someone who regularly competes in tournaments. I've been a little out of touch with the current standard format here and there just because of a lack of interest, but being a content creator, like I said, I do have to keep up with it at least a fair bit. So before we start talking about my top 5 picks for the Players' Cup Phase 2, shout out to PotownStore.com, the best place for you to get PTCGO codes, and be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. The site I'm on right here, and the site I'll be showing 4 of my 5 top picks on, is play.limitlesstcg.com, and if you go to regular limitlesstcg.com, you can just click play to get here. But I just wanted to show this off just in case people haven't seen it. You can click here for all upcoming tournaments. You can see all the upcoming tournaments registered, and you can see completed tournaments. They have meta breakdowns and everything. I'll be using this to show deck lists today, but it's just a really awesome resource, and I'm really glad it's around. So the top 5 decks I'm talking about today, they're my top 5 picks. So they're not the overall top 5 decks of the tournament, but these are the 5 decks I would be considering if I was playing in the North American top 256 Phase 2 of the Players' Cup 2. I'm not sure how much it really changes by which region you're in, but just laying it out there, I would be playing in the North American region. I would keep in mind that this is double elimination. Once you've lost your second best 2 out of 3 match, you are eliminated from Phase 2, unless they've changed that, but I'm pretty sure it's still the same way as it was in Phase 1, which I played in. It is best 2 out of 3. It's standard format with Champions Path legal. I'm not really sure if there's anything else to keep in mind when going forward with these picks. I guess I would say there were a lot of players that brought very safe decks to the last one, since it was best 2 out of 3, double elimination, like top players bringing Pika to try to grind through. I believe actually the players who got first and second in Players' Cup 1 in the finals with Lukemetal and Lukemetal, I believe they both grinded in with the same Pika list, if I remember correctly. And I also believe Will Jenkins grinded into top 16 with a Pika. So players chose safe-ish decks and did really well with that. Of course, not everybody choosing a safe deck is going to do well, but I do think people will stick to, ADPZ because it can win just about any game, stick to Eternitus because it's overwhelming, stick to Pika because it's consistent and they know it. So those are some things to keep in mind. My first pick here is something I've been talking to with a lot of clients and patrons. Actually, sorry, one more thing before we finally look at a deck. If you don't already subscribe to me on Patreon, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Celios Network. It's in the description down below. And if you are a patron of mine, you have access to all of my lists as I update them. For the Darkness Ablaze standard format, I actually had a spreadsheet that all of my patrons had access to, or all my $3 and above patrons had access to. And I was daily updating those lists up until a few weeks ago when lists kind of started getting stale and there wasn't much more to update. But you always have access to all of that, can always ask me for extra things like that. So just a shout out, if you're looking for Vivid Voltage deck lists, I will be doing the same thing, updating my lists into a spreadsheet as I go, building deck lists for Vivid Voltage. And I'll also do that for the expanded format, since I'm pretty interested in expanded when Vivid Voltage comes around. So my first pick, my first deck that I would be selecting from if I was playing in Players' Cup 2 Phase 2 would be Poison Eternitus, and I would not have thought I would be here saying this if you asked me a couple months ago. I thought Poison Eternitus seemed like a gimmick I thought it was like a fun way to play Eternitus, like try something new, get some extra evolutions in there, like Toxicroak, get Galarian Slowbro in there, do something fun with Eternitus, but for competitive purposes, stick to a more consistent version. Well, it turns out this is actually pretty good because it allows you to have outs to winning against matchups where you typically would have to get very, very lucky to win. And those matchups being things like Decigoons and Lukemetal Zacian. Because of the poison package, you are able to poison Zamazenta, you're able to poison Decidueye or Obstagoon, and you also have backup attackers. Crobat V is kind of your backup attacker, but then you also have that Hoopa, which is very important to this deck. I had somebody that cut the Hoopa, but I told them to put the Hoopa back in. I think the Hoopa is really good. And I think this list in particular is smooth, and it has just about everything it needs. So yeah, Poison Eternitus I think is good because Eternitus is a tier 1 deck, but then this Poison variant gives you outs against the things that are troublesome sometimes, like Decigoons, which you typically just lose to, and then Lukemetal Zacian, which is a really tough matchup. The Poison list gives you outs to just about anything. I will say this list is harder to play, and anybody that's been playing that should be able to attest to that. Whereas I didn't really enjoy playing straight Eternitus because it was like, all right, I'm going to attach an energy, hope my opponent doesn't have Crushing Hammer, and then if they don't, I attach, and then I just say attack a bunch of times. But especially in the Lukemetal Zacian matchup, I feel like this was a really interactive matchup. Practicing this with some coaching clients last week, Poison Eternitus versus Lukemetal, myself on either side of it. I feel like that was a really interactive matchup, and I was surprised to find that out. So I do think this is a deck you're going to want to practice with because it's different than running just a normal Eternitus list. But I won't spend too much more time talking about this, but if I was going to play Eternitus, I would highly be considering this list or a list like it, the Poison variant to be exact. So that's pick number 1, and these typically aren't in any order. I think the first 3 are kind of tied for my top 3, and then the last 2 are kind of like maybe if I feel like going with a dark horse for the tournament. So the next one is going to be Lukemetal Zacian, and I don't think that should come as a surprise to anyone that follows my channel. Lukemetal Zacian is a deck that I enjoy playing because it slows down the pace of the game. It does involve a tag team Pokemon, but it involves one of the only popular tag team Pokemon that aren't aggressive. It has a very defensive tag team Pokemon that slows down the game by discarding energy and also making your Pokemon take less damage. All around, Zacian Lukemetal is a strong deck. It doesn't have many terrible matchups, especially with this list in particular. Galarian Stunfisk is a Decigoons counter, and then it has the 3 Weakness Guard energy to at least have a chance versus fire decks. I will say if you expect Blacephalon to be popping up, then a Tapu Fini in this deck, in addition to the Weakness Guard that are already there, is a very strong counter to that, because after your Tapu Fini's gone, Zamazenta V with a Weakness Guard energy is a strong attacker versus Blounds. But I'll also say that I don't think it's a bad idea to just cut the 3 Weakness Guard energy for like 2 more medals and then 1 extra card you wanted in there, like an extra supporter or an extra doll or an extra tool scrapper, an extra whatever it is that you might want. I don't think the 3 Weakness Guard energies are essential because they're kind of there as a card that gives you a chance versus fire decks, but I don't typically expect to win versus fire decks even with the 3 Weakness Guard, but they don't hurt you too much. If you want to be extra consistent with your Intrepid Swords into extra metal energies, then I wouldn't blame you for cutting the 3 Weakness Guards for extra metals, but some players do like to have them there just as an out in case they do come up against fire decks. I don't think Centiskorch is going to be overly popular, but I do expect Centiskorch to come up. But do be aware, like, it's double elimination, so you could go like win 3 and then get 2 losses in a row, you're out of the tournament, and you only played 5 rounds, you didn't even get to see like every kind of deck in the tournament. So there's a chance you never see your bad matchup, there's a chance all you see is your bad matchup. Every tournament's kind of like that, but in a double elimination event, it kind of feels a little bit more rough to see bad matchups. So keeping the 3 weakness guard or getting rid of the weakness guard, I don't blame you either way, but I think Zacian Lukemetal is a very strong deck. It doesn't have a lot of overwhelming matchups, at least as much as it used to, but also some of its bad matchups like Mew3 Welder have kind of fallen out of the format a little bit, but they could always come back for the Players' Cup Phase 2. So yeah, Zacian Lukemetal is one of my top 3 picks. I think, yeah, top 3 picks, and then the final 2 will be my 4th and 5th pick, but really in no specific order. Then the last one of my top 3, this is actually my mom's list on Limitless, because her and I have both been playing the same ADP Zacian list for a little bit now, but I didn't place in this tournament and she did, so we'll be showing hers. So yeah, it's just a very, very straightforward ADP Zacian list. I don't have anything cute in this list. The one Marnie might even be a little atypical because people were getting really greedy and just playing like the 4 Clay or the 4 Research and no extra supporter, but I do like having the Marnie there, especially with Eldegoss V, to get back that Marnie if you ever need it. Because the Marnie is, I wouldn't run a reset stamp because this deck just wants to go Alter Creation, boss, win the game. But Marnie is a draw supporter at the end of the day that can also disrupt your opponent. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 in my opinion. So I don't mind having it there in that 60th slot. The 4 Zacian V just to be kind of more consistent, because that's the Pokemon you want to start with. Against something like Eternitus with Zigzagoons in it, you don't want to start ADP, you would rather start Zacian. The Mawile GX is insane, don't play this deck without it. And of course you could play a Decigoons tech if you want, like Duraludon. I don't have one in this list right now, but of course if you're expecting Decigoons or you don't want to take that hard loss, go ahead and slap a Duraludon into the list. Other than that, this is my list, and like I was saying earlier, this is one of the lists that you would have had access to all the way through its inception if you are a Patreon of mine, or a patron of my Patreon. I always do that. But yeah, this list has been like forming ever since POG 2020, which my mom and I both got day 2 with, and also a patron or 2 got day 2 with it in the POG 2020 format prior to the rotation. And it's really cool because my patrons kind of got to watch this list develop from preparation to POG 2020 all the way to now. And then the last 2 lists we'll look at, this one is Baby Blounds and this one is Les Buis list. The one thing to mention about the list in particular, I should go back and say I didn't really talk about why ADPZ would be one of my choices, but ADPZ would just be one of my choices because it can kind of just beat anything. I still don't think it's like the overall best deck in format based on win rates, based on like tournament performance, because there's a lot of decks very, very close in tournament performance, but this deck can just kind of win any game if it gets what it needs or the opponent doesn't get what they need, to play like a perfect game without the Denes and Crobats on the bench. But as long as ADP hits boss after Alter Creation, they're usually good to go. So this is just like the really, really safe pick. Baby Blounds, the Reshizard is really, really good because you can just play down Reshizard, attach Welder, swing 200 into something, and especially in a format with many fire weak Pokemon, with Lukemetal Z and ADP Z being 2 of the big decks, sometimes you can just attach Welder, swing with Double Blaze GX for a knockout without needing all the extra energy for Blacephalon, and then after that, if they can't clean up the kill, which Zacian decks can't clean up the kill, and they hit into you, then you just get another knockout with Outrage. So Reshizard's really good, but Blounds in general, I think it's an underrated deck and has been underrated all of Darkness Ablaze. It was a deck I really wanted to try early on, but it just was doing Blounds things to me and being clunky, which, you know, the deck can be clunky. It's a deck with 15 basic energy. I've seen some people run upwards of 18 fire energy. I do like Lay's list. He's really good at building and perfecting baby Blacephalon lists and also sequencing them. So a couple things I would mention is I would get a list that you're comfortable with for this deck and also practice it, because it is very, very hard to sequence correctly. And that's kind of been a problem with people playing Blacephalon for a while now. They thought it was an easy deck to play just because you always want to use the same attack. You just want to, you know, use Fireball Circuits and blow up your opponent, which sounds like a linear strategy, but it actually takes very good sequencing to get there. I think the deck is well positioned because we have so many 3-prize Pokemon focused decks. We have Eternitus, which, looking at that last Eternitus list, the only real backup attacker that could come out in a pinch is Hoopa. Crobat needs 2 energy attachments, but that's okay versus Lukemetal Zacian. Not really okay versus something like Baby Blounce that's always taking a one-hit knockout, or usually taking a one-hit knockout. So yeah, Eternitus is a 3-prize focused deck that Baby Blounce can capitalize on. ADPZ is a 2 and 3 prize focused deck that, like I said, you can capitalize on that with Reshizard. You can also capitalize on Lukemetal Zacian with Reshizard. And then things like Centiskorch and Pikarom are also 3-prize focused decks. So Baby Blounce kind of just has a battle with itself. If you can get it going, you can usually just pop whatever's in the active, and you just have to keep that happening. So I think Baby Blounce is very strong if you want to roll the dice on the deck kind of working with you, and you sequencing very, very well to make it work. So yeah, if you are a fan of Blacephalon, or you want kind of like a dark horse that can also kind of like ADPZ just kind of beat anything because it can just blow up whatever's there, maybe Blacephalon's could be the deck for you. This is definitely one of my top 5, like I said, but I think my top 3 would be Poison, Eternitus, Lukemetal, and ADPZ. And finally, my last one is something that caught my eye that Isaiah Bradner tweeted about a day ago, so it's not even been on the internet very long, but it's this Excadrill list. Now, I know attacking Excadrill has been going around a bit. PTCG Radio, Ross qualified in his region with an Excadrill attacking deck. We actually played a match of Starly Control versus Excadrill on this channel, myself and Ross from PTCG Radio, in our Omnipoke League match. But it's also kind of an Altaria variant, so this is definitely very interesting. Isaiah Bradner mentioned it in a tweet of his and posted the deck list that he was working on. And with Pikarom and Eternitus being meta decks, they're both fighting weak, so Excadrill has an advantage versus them. And then maybe some ADPZ and Lukemetals aren't teching for the Decigoons matchup, which means they also aren't teching for Altaria because it's basically the same thing. If they aren't teching for it, then you can just go lone Altaria and win that way versus ADPZ and versus Lukemetal. So this deck in theory should have a very nice matchup spread. I haven't tried it. This would be like my last deck on the list. If I have time to try it, and if it works out how I want it to, it could become a top runner for my picks for phase 2 if I was playing. So this is a deck I would say you don't really need to have it on your radar. Maybe a few people will decide to play it, but on paper, and from what I've seen a few people tweeting and talking about it, it does seem very promising. And if you have some extra time to try it out, I think this is a deck to potentially, you know, put into PTCGO, have a couple games versus meta decks, and see if maybe this is the deck for you. So those are my 5 top picks for Players Cup 2 Phase 2 if I were to compete in the event. Like I said, I am not. You're taking these opinions from a person who did not get enough rep for Players Cup Phase 2. But thank you for coming by to hear my thoughts on what my top picks would be. Not necessarily the top decks, although my top 3 picks are probably 3 of the best decks in the current metagame. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Shout out to PotownStore.com, my lovely sponsor, and make sure you go get some Vivid Voltage codes for release next week over there. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already for daily Pokemon TCG content. Leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video because it does help reach new viewers, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.